Looking for a solid and aggressive way to fight a4? In this video, I'll show you how to play the Scandinavian Defense. Simple ideas, key moves, and deadly plans to surprise your opponent right from move 1. In most games, white captures the pawn on d5, and this position is extremely common at the amateur level. The Scandinavian Defense often gets a bad reputation because beginners are taught that it is weak for black, mainly because black usually has to recapture with the queen, allowing white to gain tempo by attacking the queen while developing. But there is a simple and powerful idea that many players completely overlook. Let's rewind the position. Instead of immediately recapturing with the queen, black first plays knight to f6. Only after that does black recapture the pawn with the knight, meaning the queen never comes out early. This avoids the usual loss of tempo and turns the Scandinavian defense into a very solid and flexible system. From here, white has several common approaches. Some players try to hold the extra pawn with pawn to c4, others develop naturally with knight to c3, and stronger players push pawn to d4, which is considered the most principled continuation. Each of these choices gives black different tactical opportunities, and this is where the traps begin. Now let's break down all three of white's main options, because black has hidden traps prepared for each one. If white plays pawn to d4, the strongest and most principled move, black enters a very interesting and provocative line. Black captures the pawn on d4 with the knight, and after white responds with pawn to c4, it looks like white is building a strong central structure while attacking the knight. Here, black plays knight to b4, a deliberately provocative move that sets powerful tactical ideas in motion. At first glance, this position looks terrible for black. White appears to have a dangerous double attack with queen to a forecheck, seemingly winning the knight. Black stays calm and responds with knight to c6, defending the knight on b4. However, many white players believe they can still win material because of the pin, so they continue with pawn to d5, attacking the knight on c6. It looks completely lost for black, but this is exactly where the trap is sprung. Black strikes back with pawn to b5, an extremely powerful and thematic move. This tactical idea is very elegant, and you'll be surprised how often this exact position appears in real games. White now has two main options: capturing the pawn with the pawn or capturing it with the queen. Both lead directly into tactical problems. If white tries to keep the pin and plays queen takes b5, the moment the queen leaves the diagonal, the c2 square becomes undefended. Black immediately jumps in with knight to c2, forking the king and the rook and winning material on the spot. After knight to c2, the king is forced to move. When the king steps closer to attack the knight, black plays a very subtle move: bishop to d7. Black does not rush to capture the rook, because that would allow white to gain counterplay with a check. Instead, bishop to d7 calmly increases the pressure and prepares a decisive attack. What can white do here? Capturing the knight on c2 fails immediately, because black has a simple fork and a discovered attack on the queen, making the position completely hopeless. If white chooses the other option and plays pawn takes c6, black switches plans and delivers a crushing blow with bishop to g4. This move gives a double check from both the bishop and the queen, forcing the king to move. White may temporarily capture the knight, but black instantly responds with queen to d1 check, dragging the king into the open. The only safe square is king to c3, after which black captures the bishop with check. At this point, white's position is essentially lost. If the king continues to run, black easily brings the rook into the attack. In most games, white desperately tries to escape toward the queenside, but the damage has already been done. From here, black finishes the game in style. After the king steps toward b3, black plays bishop to d1 check, forcing king to a 3, and then delivers the final blow with pawn to e5. It is a beautiful finishing move, strong on move 1, and even stronger as the last move of the game. With the other bishop controlling the long diagonal, pawn to e5 becomes almost checkmate, and white's king has nowhere left to escape. After pawn to e5, the checkmate is only a few moves away. White tries desperately to shield the king, but every defensive attempt collapses. If white plays pawn to c5, black simply captures it and renews the attack. White cannot push the b-pawn because it is pinned. Eventually, white is forced to give up the queen, and after a final checking attempt, black responds with pawn to b4, followed by queen to c1, delivering a rare and beautiful checkmate from white's own back rank. It is a stunning trap, one that makes opponents instantly tilt, all triggered by the early and powerful pawn to b5. So now we know that queen takes b5 loses immediately. But what if white instead plays pawn takes b5? Black continues with knight to d4, following the same tactical theme. White cannot capture the knight because of a royal fork that would win the queen. If white avoids the capture, black still threatens knight to c2, forking the king and the rook, so white is forced to react. If white plays knight to a 3, trying to control the c2 square, black calmly plays pawn to a 5, reinforcing the knight on b4 and building a very active position. Both knights now dominate the board, severely restricting white's development. In many games, white tries bishop to d2, aiming to chase away the knight on b4. Black appears to blunder and plays pawn takes d5, deliberately inviting white to capture the knight. White gladly accepts, but black is completely ready. After the knight on b4 is captured, black unleashes the key tactical resource, queen to e4 check. This is the heart of the idea. Placing the queen on the 4th rank activates all the pieces and sets up the final decisive blow. After white blocks the check, black finally captures on b4 with check. White captures the knight and feels satisfied, believing they are now a piece up. But this is exactly where the trap fully snaps shut. The queen on e4 is x-raying white's queen, and black now unleashes the decisive discovered attack with knight to f3 check. White is forced to capture the knight, and at that moment black winning the queen outright. Not only does black win the queen, but the attack continues relentlessly. Moves like knight to c3 are met by queen takes b2, attacking the rook and key squares around the king. Black collects even more material and converts the game with ease. Now let's return to the opening position. After pawn takes d5, besides the modern plan of developing with knight to f6 followed by knight takes d5, many players still prefer the classical approach. Queen takes d5. The most common reply for white is knight to c3, immediately attacking the queen. However, some players choose a different plan and play pawn to d4 instead. After black responds with knight to f6, white often continues with pawn to c4, trying to gain tempo on the queen while building a large and ambitious pawn center. Here, black has another surprising and very strong idea. White expects the queen to retreat, perhaps to d8 or a 5, but instead black boldly plays queen to e4, keeping the queen centralized. At first glance, it looks like white will simply gain more tempo by attacking the queen, but this move is completely sound. In fact, queen to e4 is the strongest move in the position, confirmed by Stockfish, and tactically everything works perfectly for black. At this moment, white must think about king safety. The most natural-looking move, bishop to b2, actually fails on closer inspection because it leaves the g2 pawn undefended. That is why most players choose the safer option, bishop to e3, reinforcing the center and protecting critical squares around the king. Black does not hesitate. With pawn to e5, black challenges white's center and opens the long diagonal, allowing the bishop on f8 to join the attack, often with tempo-gaining checks. If white tries knight to c3 to attack the queen, black calmly develops with bishop to b4, keeping the queen active and making it hard to chase away. White still cannot play bishop to d3 because the g2 pawn would hang, and pawn to f3 is a serious blunder since black can simply capture the bishop on e3. White then looks for a tactical solution. The knight attacks the queen, and the only defender is the bishop on b4, so white plays queen to a4, creating a double attack. Black responds with knight to c6. White now believes the knight is pinned and tries pawn to d5 to win material. But once again, black uses the same tactical idea. Black plays pawn takes d5, and because the knight is pinned, white must reply with pawn takes d5, thinking a piece has been won. That is when black delivers the key in-between move. Bishop takes c3 check, opening a discovered attack along the 4th rank. This rare tactical pattern appears again in the Scandinavian. On the following move, black simply captures white's queen, reaching a completely winning position. Thanks for watching.